Hello RPG fans, welcome to the realm of unlimited imagination. If you're like me, you love to think about what kind of character you might play next in your favorite role-playing game. So today, we're going to go through a Druid build. As constructed, this Druid could be used in any campaign, any group, but I'm going to do some techniques and tactics that are specifically designed for this to be in a group that's using darkness. Follows the DnD 2024 rule set. I present Elaga Nasei. The agenda, we're going to build this character for the first 2 levels in D&D Beyond so that you can see the details, and I'll explain why I pick what I pick. As we go through the build, hopefully it gives inspiration for experienced players, and maybe some of the details I talk about will be useful if people want to just pick this up and use it in a one-shot. I do fair play builds, so this build is not meant to take advantage of game-breaking mechanics. We do a little bit of personality and backstory for people that like role-playing, and it is meant to be a character that can be effective any level between 1 and 20. Elaga Nasei, the Darkness Area of Effect Savage Druid. Now, please remember as we get started, hit that like button. It does help me, it helps the channel, and I would appreciate if you could just tippy-tap that like button. Subscribe to the channel. More subscriptions helps more people see this content, so I really would appreciate if you could do that for me. And of course, leave any comments you have down below. If I missed an optimization, if you can think of a better way to do things, if you disagree with my animal forms, let me know. Always interested to hear what people think. Let's start the conversation. The concept for this character. Let's say somebody in a party wants to play Darkness, but you really had your mindset on playing a Druid. We're going to figure out how to play a Druid very well in Darkness or Obscurement or Fog or Smoke or whatever. It's going to be fine. In this particular party, I've made a party of 5. I still needed a cleric-type character, and my original intent was to build a combination of Warlock and Divine Soul Sorcerer. The Divine Soul Sorcerer could then pick up things like Revivify and healing spells and some things like that that were missing from the group in general. But when I started looking at this Druid build, the more I looked at it, the more intrigued I became, and I'm convinced that this is probably the best character that we could put in this group. We're going to use the Circle of the Moon, and I've heard some content creators say that the Circle of the Moon is really bad now. It always had this power curve where you could get access to multi-attack early with a brown bear, but we get our subclass a level later now at level 3. Other characters have gotten more power creep, and the Moon Druid doesn't look nearly as good as it used to. But I think if you look carefully at the new Moon Druid class, it's better than it's ever been for different reasons. The bear doing damage in bear form isn't the thing anymore. We're going to have a power curve with this character that's going to be really good. We're going to be able to do damage at every level, and we're not going to rely on specifically like bear shapes and things like that to deliver it. As written, the Conjure Minor Elemental spell can be a problem. It will be very powerful later on in this build, but only really after level 15 or so. So, if you're talking level 16 to 20, it's really not that relevant. It's not how we're building the character. When I build characters, I give them ratings. So we'll go through 3 roles in combat, 2 for exploration, and 1 for social. In terms of damage, this character is a 9 out of 10. We're going to be able to do good damage at low level, mid level, high level. This character will always have things to do that can do great damage. So we'll give it a 9. Support, we're going to give that a 6. And this character is going to have healing spells and a lot of stuff to support the party. But in general, we're going to use our concentration for damaging spells, and we're going to save our support spells for out of combat. So in terms of in combat, we do have things that we can use, but I'm going to give it kind of a modest 6. Control, we're going to have some control with our spells, and we're going to have some control with our wild shapes. But the character's not made for that, so I'll give it a 5. It's average. Not meant to be a tanking character so much. In terms of exploration, we'll give it an 8. The ability to turn into tiny wild shapes and fly in where you don't belong is really good. In problem solving, I'll give that a 6. We're going to have high insight, wisdom-based skills, things to help the party. And again, wild shapes can do some very clever things. In terms of influence, I'll give it a 2 because occasionally we can talk to a tree or a plant or something else that might need some influence. But in general, we're not meant to be an influence character. The background for Elaga Nasei, she was going to be the shaman for her tribe. She's a trained fighter. She has a mind for the arcane. She's studied all kinds of magic. And eventually she decides that she's setting off looking for some forbidden magic. In my original concept, she was thinking about, researching about trying to become a warlock. So I think that's really the case. She's like thinking about that pact type magic, about setting up that kind of an agreement. Along the way, she manages to expose herself to something dangerous. Maybe she's playing around in the forest, touches something, gets really sick. In the lore that I've set up for this group, they all get put in jail. So I think with that being the case, while she's in jail, she starts to rethink things, and all of her fighting skill and magical skill and everything she's done up to this point wasn't enough to keep her out of trouble against some random leaf that she touched. So I think she looks to nature and looks to this druid idea, but I don't think she's looking at it like a lot of druids would, as a protector of nature, where they grew up that way and they're in touch with the spirit of natural things. I think it's more like she decides to make a pact with nature, where she's going to take advantage of the power of nature, she's going to protect it, she's going to take advantage of its power, and kind of like make a deal with nature. I did think about taking a barbarian level. It used to be in the past that you could take a barbarian level or 2. If you take 2 levels, you could have reckless attack, rage, get your bear form, rage out, be resistant to damage, hit for a lot of damage, do extra damage with your barbarian levels, and it was pretty good. But now I think the draw to always have a concentration spell up and running is too great. So I think barbarian is out, and fighter is the thing to do. So we're going to take fighter, we're going to grab athletics. Nice to have some good athletics. We're going to grab insight as a wisdom-based character. We want good insight. Blind fighting is the only choice for this character. You could pick something else, but trust me, blind fighting is what you want. And it helps with the darkness build. But I would say, even if you're not planning to run this character in a darkness group specifically, you want blind sight. The Conjure Woodland Being spell is really strong, but it requires you to see your targets. Blind Sight just guarantees you're always going to be able to see your targets and use Conjure Woodland Being. So with this particular build, I really don't recommend something else. We're going to pick the Sage background. Remember, if you're taking fighter levels, you always want to make the bridge between being a fighter and being whatever caster. So this is going to allow us to pick up the right ability scores that we want. It's going to give us proficiencies in Arcana and Calligraphy supplies, which will allow this character to craft and make scrolls. So that's going to bridge us up nicely. It's going to give us the Magic Initiate Wizard origin feat, which is great. We're going to take Wisdom as the spellcasting base for that. And we're going to take True Strike as the first cantrip. That's going to be our play style for the first 2 or 3 levels with this character. And then with the first level spell that we get, I think most people would just default to Shield or something like that, but I'm actually going to take Find Familiar. And I know some people are going to say, look, Druids get a Find Familiar feature. Why would you take it from Wizard? The Druid Find Familiar feature lasts for the day, and it requires you to sacrifice a wild shape or a spell slot. And especially at lower levels, I don't want to sacrifice the spell slot or the wild shape with this character. So I'm going to pick up Find Familiar here. It's just my play style. You can pick something else if you want to. Shield, I think, we're going to be in wild shape a lot, so Shield isn't as good as it might be for most characters, but I think most people would want to pick that. Pick Constitution as +1 and Wisdom as +2. In the character, we're going to make this character helpful but not likable. She's driven by legacy. She wants to be the biggest, best, brightest that anybody's ever seen. She's an empathetic, high wisdom character. I think she's going to intuitively know what characters, animals, plants, even maybe in some cases, are thinking and feeling, but I don't think she's sympathetic. So she's going to say things like, tough love, I know how you feel, I know this is hurting, but come on, get up, we got to keep going, and sort of be empathetic, but not sympathetic. I think she's supportive, but again, in a way where she'll heal anybody, she'll do anything she can to keep the party up and running, but she expects those favors to be repaid at some point. And if people can't repay that favor in terms of like healing her or something like that, they have to repay that by letting her lead the group. So I think She grew up in this family environment. She thinks she's a natural born leader, and she would want to default to leadership in the group and take credit for all the stuff they do. So if one of the other characters makes a great charisma check and stops 2 clans from fighting, I think she would want to be known that Elaga's group stopped the fighting. Not necessarily that one of the other characters made the roll or convinced them to stop, but that her group, her party. Again, if that doesn't work within your group, if your group doesn't like that leadership model and they don't want to let one person be the leader, do something different. For flaws, we would dip into that for the flaws as well. So she's always wanting to be perceived as the leader of the group, and maybe that leads her to make some certain role-playing decisions that wouldn't be too popular with the group. Now, again, as long as the players at the table are okay with it, it's cool. It's a role-playing hook. If they're not, do something else. And we're going to take Shat Archive for our species. That's going to give us everything we want for this druid. We're going to take Common Sign Language. Again, we're going to operate out of darkness. There's this, when you're in darkness, creatures can't see you, but they can still hear you. They know where you are. So having Common Sign Language, if you're going to ambush somebody out of the darkness, it allows the whole party to have a way to talk without making sound. So Common Sign Language is the thing that we've all done. We're an elf. We're medium size, 30 feet speed. Blessing of the Raven Queen, as a bonus action, teleport 30 feet to an unoccupied space that you can see. So we have to be able to see the space. Blind Sight's going to help us with that. We can use it a number of times equal to the proficiency bonus, regain all the expended uses on a long rest. Starting at 3rd level, when you use it, you get resistance to all damage when you teleport until your next turn. During that time, you're a bit translucent. This is great. If we're a druid and we go into wild shape, we can't cast spells, but this is not a spell, so we have access to a Misty Step type feature that doesn't require a spell slot. We can use it multiple times per day, and we can use it in our wild shapes. Really good. We have Dark Vision out to 60 feet. We have Fey Ancestry, which is going to give us advantage on saving throws to avoid or end a charmed condition. That's nice. We get proficiency in perception for free, resistance to necrotic damage, which can be situationally useful. And then with our trance ability, we're going to be able to pick up jewel crafting and smith's tools, and that's going to fully enable us to start our crafting career. Point buy method, we're going to take a strength of 13. As a low-level character, we're going to be a true strike fighter with a great sword, a great axe, or a heavy crossbow. So we need to have 13 strength to use those big weapons, and we need at least a 13 dexterity to use a heavy crossbow. So 13 in strength, 14 in dexterity, 13 in constitution is going to round us up to 14 with that +1 that we got from our background. And then with wisdom, we're going to take a 15 for a total of 17. And then we'll take this 1 extra point that's floating around and dump that into intelligence. If you wanted to change these scores, let's say, for instance, you're starting at a higher level and you never play through those initial levels where you want to use great swords or great axes, you could just take all those points out of strength and instead dump those over into constitution or dexterity and start out with a 16 constitution or more dexterity as you choose. Or you could balance out with some wisdom, some charisma or intelligence if you wanted that. But this is how I like the character to play, 1 to 20. With the starting equipment, we'll take the money from fighter and the starting equipment from the sage background. For armor, you have to be careful because we are going to buy a great sword, a great axe, and a heavy crossbow. That's going to use up almost all of our money and doesn't leave us in a situation where we can buy very good armor. So we just buy leather armor here just to have something. We're going to want to work our way into a breastplate as soon as we can. But at level 1, we'll just take the leather armor and we'll be a heavy hitter. And we'll rely on that second wind feature with fighter first level to heal hit points if we do get hit. So at first level, we're looking pretty good. The attack rolls don't look so good, but remember you're using True Strike, so that'll be a +5 to hit and a +3 on damage, which is just as good as any strength-based fighter could do at first level. We're just needing to use the True Strike cantrip to activate it. Level 2, we're going to take that level of Druid. We're never going to take another level of fighter. We're going to go straight up from level 1 fighter and then 19 levels of Druid. We get Druidic. We always have Speak with Animals spell prepared. That's nice when you need to use it. And we have this Druidic language that can be situationally fun. For the option here for Primal Order, of course, we don't need to pick Warden because we took that level of Fighter. We've got all the armor masteries that we would ever want, weapon masteries, all that stuff. So we take Magician. That gets us an extra cantrip. You can take Shillelagh here or whatever you want. It also gives you your Wisdom bonus to your Arcana and Nature checks, which is it's a nice feature. Allows us to be better at that stuff. All right, let's go over and take a look at how this character would then play at these low levels. So weapon masteries, Graze is nice at low levels. You miss a lot, so this lets us still do our ability bonus damage even if we miss. So it can be good in some situations. Again, by level 4 or 5, we probably don't want to be using the Graze feature, but it's good at low levels. Cleave, a similar kind of thing. Our main attack would use True Strike. If we hit with that melee attack roll and there's another creature within 5 feet that we can hit, we can make a second attack. That attack would be a strength based. So with this character, that would be the +3 to hit. It doesn't include your ability modifier to the damage anyway, so we don't care about that. But it's a chance at an extra D12 of damage. And at low levels, being able to do that extra D12 of damage sometimes is fun. It's fun and rewarding, and you might get 2 kills in 1 turn with it. So, let's take advantage of it while we have it. We also have the push that we can use with that heavy crossbow. So we got the Great Sword with Graze, the Great Axe with Cleave. If you'd rather use a Halberd for Cleave, it has a little less damage, D10 damage instead of D12. But it does have the 5-foot reach, which could potentially give you more opportunities to cleave because you'll more often be in reach of the second creature. So, yeah, it's nice. And then if you're at range and don't want to be in melee or can't get to melee, you got that heavy crossbow. Again, you just True Strike with it and turn it into a Wisdom-based attack. For our Familiar, we've got that Find Familiar spell already from level 1 Fighter through our Sage background. We're going to get a bat. We can see through its eyes and pick up any of its special senses. So we're going to use this feature if we need to have blind sight out to 60 feet. So the bat's there to be a cool familiar, and it has blind sight if we need it. You can have your bat perched on your shoulder, or if your GM likes to do area of effect spells that kill all your familiars, just remember to fly your familiar far enough away. Customize your familiar for your character. I consult with my daughter on things like this. So Elaga's familiar is this cool black bat with blue runes on its wings, and its name is Kevin. Surely your familiar could be something better suited to your character, but that's what Elaga's got. If you're doing this character as a one-shot, Shield is a better spell than Find Familiar, and when you have a lot of spell slots, you don't care about using one with your Druid feature. So consider that, use it however you want. Shillelagh just never takes off with this character. We don't get multiple attacks in our basic form. We get multiple attacks through our wild shapes. So Shillelagh won't really matter. At low levels, it's doing 7.5 damage, and we get sap or topple effects depending on whether we're using a club or a quarterstaff. But generally, we're just going to want to do True Strike with that Graze, or Cleave with the Battle Axe, or Push with the crossbow. And the heavy crossbow from range is going to do 8.5 damage, and we don't even have to be close to the enemy. That's going to be better than Shillelagh. We don't really care about using a shield. So I think at low levels, we're True Strike fighter from range, and Shillelagh isn't really a thing. But you can, if you find a way to make it work, feel free. Level 1 spells, if we get Goodberry, I think Goodberry is a premium level spell for anybody that can get it. It's 10 points of healing throughout the day. At least the tables I play at, you can use an action to feed a Goodberry to somebody, give them 1 hit point, wake them up from unconscious, stop those death saving throws. So if you've cast that once at the start of the day so that everybody has Goodberries, that leaves you with 1 spell for the whole day. So maybe it's Entangle. It's good at dividing up the battlefield. 10 things charge at you. You throw out an Entangle. Maybe half of them get entangled. You deal with the half that don't. And they have to filter in slowly. So it can be pretty good. If you have to run away, you can throw the entanglement and trip up the creatures that are trying to chase you. Let's take a look at the restrained condition. We're going to talk about restrained quite a bit. Speed goes to 0. Your attacks have disadvantage. Attack against you have advantage, and you have disadvantage on dex saves. So if you get something grappled and restrained, it's increasingly hard to get away, especially for creatures that have better dexterity than strength. They'll have a harder time using their dexterity to escape a grapple if they're also restrained. The Entangle spell just does restrained, so it's pretty good at low levels. It's a strength save. Most low-level characters aren't that strong, so it can be good. For other spells at level 1, I would take Healing Word. It's got a range. It's something that you can use as a bonus action to pick up your fallen allies. So you could do your True Strike cantrip as an action, a Healing Word as a bonus action, and you're only casting one leveled spell, so you're fine with that for the turn. You'll pick up Cure Wounds later with your Moon Druid feature, so you could take that at level 2 Druid or pass on it till you get it from your Moon Druid list, however you think about that. Fog Cloud is also worth thinking about if you're in a group that's ready for Heavy Obscurement. You can already start using that from low levels. Blind Sight lets you see within your fog cloud, so you never have a problem. Get within 10 feet. You can even use a crossbow at 10 feet if you want to, but mostly you would want to get up there with the great sword and just maul stuff. Out of combat, you've got guidance, nature-based skill checks, and other things that you can do to help. Remember, with crafting, you can start crafting at level 1 with this character. With an elf, you can do 12 hours worth of adventuring, and with the other 12 hours, assuming a 24-hour day, you can still do 8 hours of crafting and have 4 hours for your meditation that gets you your long rest for the night. In combat, you typically just want a True Strike in melee with one of your big weapons, or True Strike with your heavy crossbow from range. Those are all wisdom-based attacks with True Strike, so go, go, go. Once a day or so, you can do the Fog Cloud or Entangle, if that makes sense. Or you can just save your spell. You can also cast Goodberry. If you have a level 1 spell slot that you didn't use all day, you can cast Goodberry before you take your long rest. The Goodberries are good for 24 hours, so they will last all the way until your next long rest. So that's a way to kind of conserve spell slots if you have one left over one day. With your crafting, you're going to work on an Amulet of Health. With Wild Shape, I had so much stuff to talk about that I made a separate video for all things related to Wild Shape, why we take the forms we take, what we do in them. All that stuff's in a separate video. Please refer to that video. I didn't want to take up too much time with that stuff in this one. The discussion around Amulet of Health is also in there. For our Wild Shapes, we're going to look for interesting things for scouting, movement, senses like blind sight, conditions. We're not really going to go for damage so much. You'll see why as we go through the build. I like Weasel as the scout form. Tiny, acrobatics, stealth, perception, has a climb speed, go wherever you need to go. Remember that when you do Wild Shape, whatever you're holding becomes part of that form if you want it to. Weasels are fantastic thieves. Sneak somewhere, grab that person's diary, turn back into a weasel. You got 2 Wild Shapes, right? So you can Wild Shape into a weasel, sneak in, grab that person's diary or some potions or whatever it is that you're trying to get away with. Wild Shape again, and they become part of your form. Go back to the group, and when you turn back into an elf, you've still got all that stuff. Giant Crab, 30-foot blind sight, swim speed, water breathing, and when it hits with an attack, medium-sized or smaller things are grappled, which it will be able to use. A boar can give you 40-foot movement speed and a charge attack to make things prone, and a mule is a good thing to have good carrying capacity. By level 4, we're going to get our Moon Druid subclass. We're also going to get second level spells, and now the way we operate is going to change. So for the first 3 levels, we were kind of this True Strike fighter, and at level 4, we're going to start kicking in with this idea of a concentration spell plus a Wild Shape, and that's going to be our combat method. Moon Druid also gets higher CR beasts, so level over 3, So we already get CR1 beasts at level 3, at level 4 total, level 3 Druid. We'll get 3 times our Druid level in temporary hit points, and our armor class will be 16, 13 plus our wisdom of 3, unless the beast has a higher AC. If you look at the brown bear, you can see it has an armor class of 11. It's super easy to hit. Getting a 16 armor class when you're in that form is really good. So the brown bear form will take that, 40-foot speed, climbs 30 foot. The multi-attack on this thing is really good. Hit him with your claw first, +5 to hit. If the target is huge or smaller, if this attack hits, the target just is prone, okay? No save, no check, no nothing. Just hit them, and they're prone. The bite attack, you make that second, get advantage on the attack if they're prone. It's pretty good. You're probably by now attacking in darkness or obscurement anyway. You probably get advantage from that. But remember that we have blind sight from our blind fighting feature with fighter. So if we're in the bear form, that blind sight is still working just fine. We run up with the bear, we can see whatever we need to see. Warhorse will become our carrying thing. Any druid can get this at level 4. It's a half CR. So you're good to go. But the Warhorse has 60 feet of movement speed. That's a big draw. This thing can carry a ton. It has 18 strength. It's large size. Also has this charge attack where if it moves 20 feet like the boar, when it charges towards something, it can do extra damage. And just like the bear form can inflict that prone condition. In combat, somebody could ride you if that's good with your party or somebody wants to ride. Talk that out with your GM and your group. Remember, if you're trying to get the charge feature in darkness where you have to move 20 feet toward something and you're already in melee with it, if you're in darkness of obscurement and it can't see you, you can just walk away from it. Attacks of opportunity only happen if the enemy can see you. So if you're in the darkness, in obscurement, you just walk away, charge back in 20 feet. That Warhorse has 60 feet of movement. You could easily walk back 30 feet, charge 30 feet forward, no problem. Or you could even move back 20, move in 20, and then move somewhere else with the other 20 feet of movement. All right. So the Paladin could be an interesting option to ride you if you want to let the Paladin ride you into combat and smite something. If the GM allows you to do this, what it enables is the two of you can charge out of the darkness spell and go mobile, hit something, knock it prone. The Paladin can get off a big smite, and you can run back into the darkness. Spike Growth is a second level spell. You get access to that. Try to use this in ways that it was intended to use. Cast a spell and push things into it. Don't try to use the grapple thing where you drag things all around the edge. I don't consider that fair play. If it's allowed at your table, do whatever your table is okay with. But for me, it's more about pushing things around in the Spike Growth. This graphic kind of shows our 5 characters. They've cast the darkness spell. These 2 red squares are some enemies that have come in and they've engaged us in close combat. The druid can cast Spike Growth, just overlap the enemies, and then we can start pushing them around in it. Any other enemies that are further back have to get through that Spike Growth and they'll take damage too. It's a great control feature. We also get the Moonbeam spell, and with our spells that are on the Moon Druid subclass list, we can cast those in wild shape. So Moonbeam is one of those spells. It casts a silvery beam of pale light in a 5-foot radius, so 10 foot wide, 40-foot high cylinder, centered on a point within range. Notice you don't have to be able to see the point. It's just a point within range. Until the spell ends, dim light fills the cylinder, and you can take a magic action on later turns to move the cylinder up to 60 feet. When the cylinder appears, each creature in it makes a con save. If they fail, they take 2d10 radiant damage. If they're shape-shifted or polymorphed, they go back to their true form. On a successful save, they take half damage. Creature also makes the save when the spell's area moves into its space. So on later turns, when you use that 60 foot of movement, you can move it across and expose enemies to it. Or when it enters or ends its spell in that area. So if a creature walks into it or ends its turn, it takes that damage as well. Upcasts by 1d10 for each spell slot that you upcast it, so it's pretty nice. Be careful with the Moonbeam, though, if you're in this darkness-based group, if you do the same thing that you did with Spike Growth. As soon as you cast it, it ends. Darkness says, if any of this spell's areas overlap an area of bright or dim light created by a second level spell or lower, the other spell is dispelled. Moonbeam, second level, creates dim light. Done. As soon as the spell is cast, it's gone. So you can't put your Moonbeam into the darkness. That doesn't work. And you don't want dim light in your darkness anyway, right? So if your party's using this tactic, for example, you can put the Moonbeam behind the darkness, and your other characters can push it into the Moonbeam and then tank from the edge of the darkness just fine. So Moonbeam kind of has to be used outside of the darkness. A little bit of a limitation. Pass Without Trace is a fantastic way to get high stealth checks and not leave tracks. Lesser Restoration is kind of a healer tax. We want this on our list. Longstrider, once we get more spell slots, this is a fantastic spell. Cast it on ourselves or another character, increase that target's speed by 10 feet. It's a 1 hour duration, which is quite a long time, and it doesn't require concentration. So we just increase our movement. There's a lot of reasons why we want to be able to move 10 more feet. And if we upcast it, we can affect more creatures, so we can Longstrider multiple things. Here's that Circle of the Moon spell list: Cure Wounds, Moonbeam, Starry Wisp, Conjure Animals, Fount of Moonlight, Mass Cure Wounds. And we can cast all of those in Wild Shape. So it's less spells than most Druids get on their lists, but since you can cast them in Wild Shape, it's got more utility for us. So by level 3 Druid, our list looks like this: Healing Word, Fog Cloud, Longstrider, Lesser Restoration, Spike Growth, Pass Without Trace, Starry Wisp, Cure Wounds, and Moonbeam we get from the Moon Druid features. And remember that the Familiar can still do... You can cast your Cure Wounds spell as in your beast form. It takes your action, of course, to do that, magic action to do it, but the Familiar can deliver that touch if you can't get to your ally. By level 4, your gameplay is going to change, right? We're going to prep with Longstrider if possible, and we're going to use this idea of cast a spell and use a Wild Shape. That might be Spike Growth, it might be Moonbeam. We're going to use the crab form to grapple things and dunk them into the Moonbeam. So basically, hit with a crab. You cast Moonbeam turn 1, the character's most likely going to move out of the Moonbeam. Next turn, we crab shape, we come up, we hit them with an attack, grapple them, push them back into the Moonbeam, and hold them there. Once they're in the Moonbeam, they have a choice. They can either attack the Druid, in which case they're going to stay there and end their turn in Moonbeam and take the damage again, or they can spend their turn trying to get out of the grapple, in which case we're completely fine with that because they've wasted their whole turn. We can go hit them with a claw again and try to put them back in the Moonbeam. All right, so let's kind of compare how the damage looks. This bear shape, that was kind of like our premium thing, right? We get 9 temporary hit points for any Wild Shape that we use. The bear would do D8 plus 3 damage with the bite, D4 plus 3 with the claw, and create the prone condition. So on average, that's 13 damage if both strikes hit. With the True Strike and a Heavy Crossbow, we could do 8.5 damage. If we cast a Spike Growth first and then push things 10 feet, that would be an extra 44 damage. So you can see, if we can do this spell plus attack, it's 18.5 damage. We're already doing better damage than we could with the bear, thanks to these weapon masteries. If we do Moonbeam and Crab, first turn, put them in the Moonbeam, do damage to them. Turns after that, we hit, we grapple, we dunk them in the Moonbeam. D6 plus 1 damage, plus 2d10 on the turn that we put them into the Moonbeam, and if they don't get away, they take another 2d10 on their turn if they end it in the Moonbeam. And that's 26.5 damage. So you can see we go from being kind of this True Strike warrior straight into being a Moonbeam crab. You could also do the bear form if prone is important. Or you could cast Spike Growth. Spike Growth has more utility for the group. Moonbeam has more damage if you've only got 1 or 2 targets. All right, at level 5, we'd be Druid 4, we'd get our first feat. There's Elven Accuracy is a consideration, but Elven Accuracy only applies to dexterity-based attacks or wisdom, intelligence, charisma. So it would work with True Strike, but if we become an animal form, the attacks are typically strength-based, and Elven Accuracy then wouldn't apply to those strength-based attacks. So just because of that, I think Warcaster is better. There's a bunch of stuff that we could do to help with animal forms: Charger, Speedy, Sentinel. There's other things we could do like Fey Touch, Telekinetic, Inspiring Leader. There's a ton of feats you could take, but I like Warcaster. We do keep that advantage on saves for concentration in animal form. Remember, we keep access to all of our feats. Again, refer to that wild shape for all the details on that if you don't know how it works. At level 5, Druid 4, we get more shapes. I like Crocodile, Constrictor Snake, things like that. We're going to try to add restrained effects to our list of things that we can do. Crocodile hits things, gets the grappled, and also the restrained condition. And whereas a crab, you could argue, one turn you attack it with your claw and it's grappled. The next turn, if you want to hit it with the same claw again, you would probably have to give up the grapple. With a crocodile, once it's bitten, you have it grappled. It's easy to say, I just keep chomping on it, right? I keep chewing on it, so every turn you can reapply more damage and the grapple and restrain. Again, it's kind of this automatic grappled and restrained thing, and it's a form of control. It's not meant to be a high damage thing. It's meant to be a form of control where you need to control the enemy. If it's the last enemy of the combat and you want to take him prisoner, this is kind of a way to get him, grapple him, restrain him, and subdue him. Then do some non-lethal damage to him or whatever. You also get your Bastion at level 5. You're a crafter. Workshop and Smithy are good for crafters. Gardens, greenhouses are good for druids. Menagerie might be something fun. When we get to Druid 5, we get 3rd level spells. We also get the Wild Resurgence feature. On each turn, if you have no uses of Wild Shape left, you can give yourself a Wild Shape by expending a spell slot. For this particular character, we're not going to do it the other way around. We're not going to give up many Wild Shapes for spell slots. The reason you would want to do this is the temporary hit points. At level 6, Druid 5, we're getting 15 temporary hit points every time we Wild Shape, and that's quite a bit for 6th level, right? So if we Wild Shape, we go into combat, we get hit a couple times, we've lost our temporary hit points, and we just want to get those temporary hit points back, we can sacrifice a level 1 spell slot, change to a different animal form, get back our temporary hit points. And if you look at other spells that could give you temporary hit points at level 1, it's better than everything else you could do with a level 1 spell. It's better than False Life. I mean, you'd have to upcast Armor of Agathis to level 3 to get 15 hit points. So it's with the Moon Druid, it's worth consideration to trade in a 1st level spell just for that 15 temporary hit points. For 3rd level spells, Revivify is a healer tax. If you ever need this spell and you don't have it memorized, you're going to really be ridiculed by your party, or you should be. So I think for healers that get this spell, when you get 3rd level spells, you just put it as a prepared spell and you just don't change it. The cost of being a healer. And you don't really need other things more desperately, so Revivify is good. Dispel Magic is very powerful situationally. You know, if the enemy caster has Spirit Guardians or some other really nasty concentration spell, Dispel Magic might be just the right thing. Use it out of combat probably more than you would use it in combat, but it can be used to strip away spell effects. Aura Vitality, I think, is worth looking at. Again, with this character, we want to concentrate on just certain specific spells during combat and save our other spells and spell slots for out-of-combat healing and helping. If your GM rules that Aura Vitality can only be used in combat because it's a per-turn kind of thing, per round, and technically there's not rounds out of combat, you know, have that discussion. But most groups allow this spell to be cast out of combat. It heals an average of 70 hit points over 10 rounds, and you can spread that out among the whole group. So if you can't get a short rest and you're moving between one location and another, You can cast this spell, heal up a ton of hit points. It is a 3rd level spell though, so burning a 3rd level spell slot, I think it's fair for a 3rd level spell. So with 3rd level spells, that puts us on Dispel Magic, Revivify, and Aura Vitality. Conjure Animals is here, but I don't know. I'd probably rather cast Moonbeam or other spells. You can use Conjure Animals if you want. Look it up. See if you like it. At Druid 6, we get Wild Shapes going up to CR2 with our Moon Druid. The most exciting thing for me, I hope this gets reprinted. The Giant Constrictor Snake is a huge beast. Huge. So if it's written the way that most of the stuff is written in the new rules, that would allow us to automatically grapple and restrain things up to huge size. So you can fly up as an owl, switch over to a giant constrictor form, grapple a dragon, and knock it out of the sky. Could be pretty cool, right? That's probably the CR2 form that I would look for. There's also, I think, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, we also get at Druid 6 Lunar Radiance. That allows us to do radiant damage with our wild shape strikes. That's good if you need to bypass some kind of damage resistance. Increased toughness is, I think, one of the highlights of the entire Moon Druid subclass now. Add your Wisdom modifier to your Constitution saving throws while you're in wild shape. Being able to add your Wisdom score when you're doing concentration checks or any Constitution save is really strong. We took Warcaster, so we have advantage. So now we've got a boosted ability score, and we really should be doing fantastic saves. At Druid 7, step 2 of becoming overpowered. So step 1 is getting the concentration feature. Step 2 is getting access to 4th level spells. We also get Elemental Fury. We're going to take Primal Strikes here so that when we're in beast form, we do an extra 1d8 cold fire damage. Or Lightning. Lightning or Thunder. That's cool. Nice extra damage, we'll take it. The 4th level spell that we're looking for, of course, is Conjure Woodland Beings. That's creates an emanation. So remember, an emanation is 10 feet away from you. So if you're medium-sized, it's a certain emanation. If you're that huge-sized constrictor snake, you have a massive emanation, right? Because it's 10 feet all around you. So this can be pretty cool. If you want to expose a lot of creatures to Conjure Woodland Beings, you can take that huge form. Whenever the emanation enters a space of a creature you can see, or whenever a creature you can see enters or ends, you can force it to make a Wisdom saving throw. Because you can choose, that means you don't have to do it on friends. The creature takes 5d8 force damage on a failed save, half on a successful save. In addition, if that already wasn't powerful enough, we can also take Disengage as a bonus action. So that lets us disengage, move wherever we want, and not take attacks of opportunities as we expose everything to this spell effect. So Longstrider gives us more ability to move this effect around. Conjure Woodland Beings lets us ignore allies. We have to be able to see the target, but because we have that 10-foot blind sight, we can always see anything within 10 feet. So we're done. We turn into a warhorse. We have 70 feet of move speed. When we hit Druid 8, we can take an owl form and have 60 feet of flying speed. But that's what we're going to do. Conjure Woodland Beings, wild shape, and then just run everywhere. In Darkness and Obscurement, we just come out of the darkness, hit everything, run back into the darkness. Really strong. Remember that you have the Bat Familiar. If for some reason your DM is saying, well, you wouldn't know that that creature is there to run out and attack it, you could use your bonus action, skip the Disengage action, use your bonus action to get 60 foot of blind sight, see whatever it is that you need to see, and run out. So that's it. If you don't really need the blind sight at this level, you could also just swap the bat out for a different familiar if you prefer something else. Get an owl familiar. Conjure Woodland Beings is going to be such a strong spell for many levels that we have to ensure from now on, whatever spells we take shouldn't interfere with our concentration slots. Divination is a good spell like that. If you don't burn your 4th level spot, one of your spell slots, and you end the day, you can use Divination right before you take a long rest. Burn that spell slot for some role-playing fun. Freedom of Movement, if you need it, this is another one of those spells that, you know, when you're up against paralyzed, restrained, crazy conditions, and you can cast Freedom of Movement and free up your group, it's incredible. You get an additional target for every level that you upcast it. So at very high levels, if this is exactly what you need, it's incredible to cast it on the whole group. So by level 8, out of combat, we still got our Weasel Scouting, Wisdom skills, Pass Without Trace, Guidance, all that stuff. In social settings, we just chilling, letting the high charisma people do their stuff. Let's talk through the combat options. Level 8, we got the Conjure Woodland Beings Wild Shape. We've got the Spike Growth and moving things around. We've got the Moonbeam gimmick that we can still use. We can heal people, even heal them from Wild Shape if we need to. Let's compare damage. If we cast Spike Growth and move them around in True Spike in the spikes with our True Strike, by now the True Strike is doing an extra d6 of damage. So we could do 23 damage and enable a bunch of damage from the rest of the party. The Moonbeam trick, if we cast that just at 2nd level, we're looking at 22 damage on our turn and then another 11 if they don't get away. So 33 damage from the Moonbeam gimmick. Again, more damage for the Druid, less damage for the whole group, but they can still take advantage of pushing things into the Moonbeam. And then Conjure Woodland Beings. 5d8 per target, save for half. 22.5 average damage if they don't save. If they contact three targets and they get that contact on our turn and also on the enemy turn, that's 135 damage, save for half. So it's not even on the same scale, right? Like our best trick is doing 23, 33, 40 damage, something like that in a turn, whereas Conjure Woodland Beings against even just 3 targets is doing over 100 damage potentially. We would probably average against 3 targets, and knowing that we probably couldn't get 2 contacts, we'd still be around 100 damage with that. We have very high spell save DC on this character, so it's really going to be the go-to method for us to do damage. But again, it's good for us, but it's not enabling a bunch of damage with the rest of the group. So there are times where that Spike Growth or Moonbeam and enabling more damage from the rest of the group is still going to be better. But there's going to be a lot of times where we just Conjure Woodland Beings and run around. We've got Blind Sight, we've got forms that have Blind Sight, we've got movement for swimming, climbing, whatever we need. So just remember, at Elaga, as I'm thinking of her, not necessarily a nice character, and so she's grabbing this power from nature, putting on a wild shape, and tearing things apart. Using these spells to get Spike Growth in the way, to get Moonbeams to do damage, to do Conjure Woodland Beings. So she's kind of making nature serve her, and in return doing favors for nature, kind of like a trade, kind of like a Warlock pact, except with nature. Role play your Conjure Woodland Beings. You can make up anything in this game, so remember, Conjure Woodland Beings doesn't have a standard look. It could be some nice, pretty butterflies. It could be rainbow-colored lion cubs. Whatever you want, you know. Have fun with it. Customize it. Really give it some flavor. Make it fit your character. For Elaga, she's kind of a dark and serious character. So her Conjure Woodland Beings, she summons these spectral blue snakes that just slither in and out, attack characters, wrap around them, fly through them, whatever it is that happens. We could have all kinds of cool spell descriptions on how that works, but for Elaga, it's these spectral blue snakes. That's kind of going to be her gimmick. All right, at level 9, Druid 8, we get that owl. We get a flying speed finally. I don't believe the extra CR from Moon Druid solves the flying thing. So you still have to wait till level 8 Druid to get flying. But here we could pick up Owl. Owl's a tiny creature. There's also Giant Owl. We'll probably see Giant Owl reprinted in the 2024 Monster Manual. But the Tiny Owl is really good for combat in dungeons, underground, whatever. It has flyby, doesn't provoke attacks of opportunity. Get our Conjure Woodland beings up and running, run around, smash everything. Okay. Concentration, again, I go through all of this in the Wild Shape video. Go reference that if you don't understand how all this stuff is taking place. But for concentration, we're going to have con save proficiency from fighter. We get to keep that in Wild Shape. We're going to try to make our Amulet of Health fit the Owl. That's going to give us a 19 Constitution in our Owl form instead of 8. We have that increased toughness feature for Moon Druid for another +4 from our Wisdom. So altogether, that's going to give us a +11 on every Constitution save we make in Wild Shape. Not just concentration saves. Poison, anything that affects our Constitution makes us make a Constitution save, +11. For concentration checks, we're going to auto-succeed on any of the basic checks. And just to give you an idea how strong this is, if we were hit for 40 damage, maybe a crit hit, maybe some lightning bolt from a caster, fireball, something like that, hits us for 40. We would have to make a DC 20 concentration check. With advantage from Warcaster, we have an 83% chance to succeed on that. If we have Bless up and running, we're almost guaranteed to make a DC 20 concentration check. That extra +4 is really, statistically, it's a lot. With the Conjure Woodland beings being very strong, levels 8 through 14 or so, that's going to be our combat tactic. We've also got the other damage modes that we can do, so let's just build this Druid pretty quickly from here on out. Talking about feats as we level up, if you're in a campaign and you're going level by level, I think we want to get Wisdom to 20 as soon as we can. So at Druid 8, we would probably take that Wisdom score to 20. That's going to increase our Wisdom save and spell DC. With the Moon Druid, it's also going to give us more armor class and con save, so we're going to get that maxed out as soon as we can. At levels 12 and 16, you could look at Speedy and Grappler. Speedy gives you another 10 feet of movement speed, and Grappler is going to allow us to move things around without having to cost a lot of movement. And as we get in higher levels, that might be more and more important. As an alternate, if you're building this as a one-shot, or if you have access to an Ioun Stone of Wisdom or can craft it, you can use the Ioun Stone to max your Wisdom at 20. And easily, you could say that the Ioun Stone still circles around any animal form. I don't think there's even an argument there that equipment could be used by any wild shape. So you could do that. That would allow you to take feats a bit at a time, take Resilient Wisdom, get proficiency in Wisdom saving throws. That would be really good. You could take a feat like Shadow Touched to get your Wisdom maxed out at 20 and gain Invisibility. And you can cast Invisibility and go into your Weasel form. And then not only are you tiny and stealthy and sneaky, you're also invisible. It's pretty incredible. At Druid 16, you could even take something like Alertness feat, Toughness feat. You could take Dexterity, Resilient Dexterity to get proficiency in your Dexterity saves. Remember, those proficiencies do carry over in your beast shapes, in your wild shape. So all of those things could be possible for your Druid. Spells, remember that we just don't want to compete with the Conjure Woodland beings. Once we get past level 14 Druid, when we get to level 15, I'm going to show you that Conjure Minor Elementals kicks in to a level where it's going to be, potentially our go-to damage form in our final phase. But for now, suffice to say, we're going to try to pick spells that don't interfere with that concentration. At level 5 spells, we get Mass Cure Wounds, and remember, we can cast that in Wild Shape as our Circle of Moon feature. Also get some things like Commune with Nature. Greater Restoration, I think, is another healer tax. You just put that on your spell list and always have it. At Druid level 10, you get Moonlight Step. It's basically another Misty Step feature. Level 6 spells, Hero's Feast, Transport via Plants are interesting. Level 7 spells, Firestorm is one of those spells that you could cast and not interfere with other concentration spells. Also look at Plane Shift, things like that. For Wild Shapes, at level 9 we could get CR3 Wild Shapes. In the 2014 rules there was a giant scorpion that had 3 attacks, Claw, Claw, Sting, and that's going to enable good stuff for us later on. It's also got a DC 12 poison. I think it's a save for half poison, but anyway, it's extra damage. Pretty cool. Killer Whale, underwater form, 60 feet of swim speed, 120 feet of blind sight, and really a big emanation. So if you want that 10-foot emanation around a huge creature underwater, Killer Whale can be interesting. CR4, level 12, we get CR4 Wild Shapes. Elephant's interesting. That could be our Beast of Burden now. It's really big. It's pretty much only an outdoorsy kind of thing. But it has 2 gore attacks for good damage. And remember, we're going to get other features that add damage to our primal strikes, adding damage, and other things that are going to add damage. So we get 2 gore attacks, and we get a bonus trample against prone things. So basically you run in 2 attacks, knock them prone, bonus action to do more damage, and then you stack extra damage on top of that. Could be interesting. Stegosaurus, there's other creatures, but they don't really have many good redeeming qualities. Let's hope that there's some better CR4 and 3 and 4 beasts. At this level, combat is simple. We upcast Conjure Woodland Beings. We wild shape, we destroy things, we loot the corpses. Just to do damage comparison again, and this is kind of looking at casting up to level 7 spells, right? So this is true for spells up to 6th level, but we're going to talk, once we can cast a 7th level spell slot, we're going to talk about what that means. So we're going to compare that here at level 14. So True Strike, same thing, still doing low damage, but enabling a lot of stuff from the rest of the group. Moonbeam, same kind of thing. If we upcast that, let's say we're out of spell slots for Conjure Woodland Beings for some reason, we could upcast that to 3rd level and do something like 44 damage to a target that gets grappled and restrained in the Moonbeam. That's not bad for an alternate damage source. Conjure Woodland Beings here is 8d8, 36 damage per contact, save for half. If you could get 2 contacts on 3 targets, it's over 200 damage potential. If you had something like 8 targets, if the battlefield is just littered with targets. Fireball is traditionally a good thing, but this could be crazy damage that you do running around. And unlike Fireball, you cast this once, and every turn, you do that damage every turn without burning a spell slot. So it's really good. You got a good delivery system. But Conjure Minor Elementals, by the time we can cast 7th level spells, if we can also get a beast form that has 3 attacks, like that Scorpion, we would have 3 attacks, D8 plus 5, an extra D8 from Primal, 8d8 per hit from Conjure Minor Elementals upcast to 7th level. 49 damage per hit, 147 damage if they all 3 hit. We have a plus 5 to hit at this level is pretty bad. We'll have advantage most times because we're operating out of Darkness or Obscurement. Or we can knock things prone to get advantage. But even if we had Bless and advantage, we would only hit 68% on average. So that reduces us to 100 average damage in a round. The builds that are really abusing CME are making multiple attacks per round at really high attack rolls. So this is, I think CME for Druids, as written, it's okay for Druids because they're kind of low hit rates and they don't get, or at least so far, we don't have animals with 4, 5, 6 attacks. If they make some kind of crazy spider form that has 4 to 8 attacks per turn, then Conjure Minor Elementals is just going to be absolutely busted. So I hope we get better forms, but I hope they don't completely break the game with it. So if we compare this, just on 1 or 2 targets, Conjure Woodland Beings is doing 36 on a target, potentially 36 more on a second contact. With all the saves, maybe that averages like 54 damage in a round, and trying to make that fully effective against 1 or 2 targets, hitting them, and also having them end their turn isn't always possible. Conjure Minor Elementals, on the other hand, you cast it, you get up in their face, you do a bunch of attacks, and the damage just gets done, right? So at 7th level, Conjure Minor Elementals is better against any fight where there's 1 or 2 targets. At 8th level, it's better in a fight with up to 4 targets. And at 9th level, it's better in a even if there's 5 targets. So it gets really powerful really fast at higher levels, even with only 3 attacks. Conjure Minor Elementals can put you in melee combat with super dangerous foes. But remember, at this level, we're getting 40 to 50 hit points, temporary hit points every time we wild shape. So we don't really care about being in combat with something dangerous. It hits us a couple times, strips off our temporary hit points. We simply do another wild shape and get another 50 hit points. So it's really good. So that's our final form, right? So this Druid starts out as a True Strike fighter, can be a Moon Bear, Moonbeam Crab, Conjure Woodland being Aura Owl, can be a Conjure Minor Elemental Scorpion that's attacking. And depending on what we get in the 2024 Monster Manual, there could be even more cool things that we could do with this. It's an interesting character. At level 14, we get an extra 2d10 damage once per turn with Moon Druid. Level 8 spells, I don't know, Befuddlement is crazy on spellcasters if they fail to save. Druid 15 to Primal Strikes becomes 2d8. We get level 9 spells. True Resurrection is interesting. And at Druid 18, we can cast almost any spell from Wild Shape. We can't use things that have expensive components because, remember, if we need like 1,000 gold piece chalice as a material component, that's probably become part of our Wild Shape, so we can't cast those spells. But we can cast almost anything we want. Wild Shapes at higher level, Giant Crocodile is pretty cool. Brontosaurus is pretty lame. Again, the crocodile, just because of the huge size, can bite, grapple, restrain almost anything in the game. The hulking crab is really good. I hope they reprint the hulking crab. It's a huge version of the crab, and it should, if the rules are consistent, it should allow you to grapple huge creatures. So endgame, we don't really get great forms at CR 6. Giant Ape is 7, Tyrannosaurus is 8. Those are out of reach. But still, at level 20, we're Fighter 1 Druid 19. We get 57 hit points per Wild Shape. Wild Resurgence, we can do tons of Wild Shape. If we look at spending all of our level 1, 2, and 3 slots into Wild Shapes, that's 798 hit points that we could get as temporary hit points throughout the combat. As long as things aren't doing, insane damage to you, you can tank like 74 damage per round and just keep changing your Wild Shape and restoring those temporary hit points. You have, at level 20, you have massive bonus to your saves. Good con saves. Plus 15 on your con save while you're Wild Shape. Conjure Woodland Beings, Conjure Minor Elementals, cast spells while you're in Wild Shape, Revivify, Hero's Feast, Greater Restoration. This is a dominant build. This is one of those builds that any gauntlet, solo gauntlet, team gauntlet, I don't care how hard they try to make the gauntlet for any character at any level, I think this character has as much chance of completing that gauntlet as any character that you could build. If they try to throw something at you where you need to climb or swim or fly, no problem. Shift into that form, get it done. If they throw you underwater, no problem. Crab form, get it done. You can cast spells while you're in Wild Shape. While you have water breathing, you should reasonably be able to do your Moonbeam Crab form. Remember, even if things surround you, like in some gauntlets you get surrounded by, I think there's a gauntlet I saw where there was a whole bunch of sharks, and the sharks all surrounded this character, and he was getting bitten to death very quickly. Remember, Shatter Kai, teleport 30 feet, gain resistance to all damage. Sharks all have to reorient themselves. They probably have to move through a moonbeam to get to you. Just shred them, teleport around, take out masses of monsters, with your Conjure Woodland Beings aura. So, I mean, if you were a crab underwater with Conjure Woodland Beings and you got surrounded by sharks, I would just giggle, right? I would teleport out, just swim all around them and expose them, and then if they came back to me on my turn, they would get exposed again. It's crazy. If you did something like a Ring of Free Action, then even trying to paralyze you or restrain you wouldn't work. Even if they tried to do some crazy anti-magic thing where the final boss is in an anti-magic field and spellcasters and all the characters that are using spells to accentuate their abilities, we don't care. We just go into our best wild shape and just chomp, pinch, claw, drag, just savage them. Like we don't even need magic. Just like that final scene in Avengers where the Hulk picks up Loki and smashes him into the floor 100 times. I mean, we just do that. So, I don't know. This character's crazy. I think it can do any adventure in the game, whether it's this darkness group or any group. At level 20, 19 armor class is pretty modest. We'd have 18 in our wild shapes. We could potentially have some other gear to improve that, but we don't really need to. If we don't want to get hit, we basically go somewhere else. If we're going to get hit, we take resistance to the damage. We change our wild shape to get tons and tons of temporary hit points, so it doesn't matter. 185 hit points, and in this version, of course, I took that wisdom save. You could easily also take it where you've got resilient dexterity and have that dex save and get another, +6 to your dex save, have a +8. And remember that the strength, dex, and constitution, if you have proficiencies in those saves, it carries over to your wild shape. That's Elaga Nasei, the Darkness Area of Effect Druid. I hope you like this. Please hit that like button on the way out if you didn't hit it on the way in. Subscribe to the channel. Do help me try to get this channel a little more momentum. Leave comments down below. Your feedback is welcome as always. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next adventure.